So while the U.S. is engaged in waging war across the world in the Middle East and wondering, oh, who's gonna hurt us next? Who's a threat? Who's a threat? Who should I fucking bomb? Who should I drone today? China's doing something a little differently. They are engaging in a war against polluters. And this is something that people have, China has drawn criticism from the world stage on in the past because clearly they have turned a blind eye, or at least they haven't put serious resources into addressing some of these very serious problems up till now. But hey, I'm going to give them credit today because they did address some of it. Let's go ahead and take a look at this story I've got for you. China makes arrests, shuts down rogue chemical factories that spewed banned ozone-depleting gas. Now, these are CFCs. If you don't know what that is, that's something found in aerosols back in the day. They're not supposed to be used anymore. They're found in a lot of different products, and apparently in this case they're for foams that are used in construction. So these are chemicals that literally deplete the ozone layer. They rip a hole in the ozone layer, and we figured out that there was a hole developing over Antarctica, and that's really bad. Okay, greenhouse gases, they warm up the planet by trapping heat, right? But this is just getting rid of the protective layer that keeps us safe. I mean, that is something that could literally end life on this planet directly. I mean, it could. If I'm not mistaken, couldn't it light the planet on fire if it gets bad enough? So this was something that the world did come together on, and they banned these chemicals. And it has been largely effective, okay? This hole has been closing over time. But the rate that it was closing actually slowed down over the past couple of years. And so people realized that someone is still manufacturing these things, and they're still being used. And so we have a graphic here. In this graphic, monitoring stations in Japan and Korea designed to track unwanted emissions in the atmosphere attempted to pinpoint the origin of an increase in CFC-11 emissions. So they tracked these things, they let the Chinese authorities know, and the government has followed up on the companies we identified in 2018. It has undertaken a nationwide enforcement effort, including raising the penalties for using CFC-11, and has shut down at least 2 CFC-11 production sites. So they're getting serious about this, okay? And in other news similar to this, the EU is planning satellites that will give accurate measures in monitoring CO2 emissions across the world. So they can literally look down and pinpoint a specific factory and see how much emissions are coming from that particular factory. So we'll know if they're lying. If they're just saying, oh, these are our emissions and that's the end of the story, we can now tell once these are in the skies. And they're not going to hit till, what? 2025 is when they're planning to launch. But these are currently in development. I think California was trying to plan a similar measure with U.S. satellites. It kind of blows my mind that NASA is not already doing this, but apparently there are existing satellites, but they're just not as accurate, and the sampling density is not as solid. Okay, so this little graphic kind of explains that to an extent. So this is good developments. But what strikes me here though is that 2025, dude, that's way late in the game. Come on. We have to do this way sooner than later. I can't believe, you can't tell me that we didn't have the technology to do this already. I firmly believe, I know probably for a fact, okay, that we had this technology. This isn't like, oh, we just figured out how to do this. No, I'm sure we could have been doing this probably 10 years ago, or at least by 2015, which is 10 years before these will actually go into effect. So really dragging your feet on that, Europe and everybody. I mean, this is just typical of the climate conversation, is people not giving it the sincerity that it deserves. And in another story in the future, we're going to talk about the decreasing biodiversity on the planet, which is probably the biggest red flag. Okay, that's the thing that nobody talks about. The depletion of topsoil, also really serious issue in terms of climate change. But God, man, I'm just glad to see stories like this. Okay, and I know China is they're not perfect on this issue. There's many critiques to be made, but this is a day where, yes, I'm going to give them credit, and I'm going to be like, more of this, okay? More of this. Please, more of this. So yeah, let's get really serious about these climate change issues. This is a war. Keep it real, guys. This is a war. And ultimately, I have a friend who has posed this hypothetical to me. As you know, I'm pretty libertarian in terms of personal freedoms. I do think the government can address many of these serious issues, and I have faith in the government as a libertarian. I'm a left-wing libertarian, but ultimately, I've had more authoritarian friends pose these hypotheticals to me, like what if Brazil, for example, just sells off the Amazonian rainforest and they are literally threatening the existence of life and biodiversity and things like that? What if it is a credible threat to humanity and they're doing that? You know, can the rest of the world respond by doing like an economic embargo on them, or maybe even a military embargo, like put ships, don't let anyone leave the country, just do a total embargo of the country till they agree to end this practice? And I could see myself supporting that. If it really came down to it, if it's Earth or them, if it's Earth or I have to cave and do some kind of authoritarian action, I'm going to pick Earth, guys, because I'm a libertarian, but survival trumps that. It kind of does, okay? I want this planet to survive. I want the biodiversity and animals and humans. I want us to thrive for thousands of more years. I don't want to totally just end this experiment and say, fuck it, let that country do whatever it wants, even if it threatens the rest of us. Hell nah. So this is a real war, okay? The war for planet Earth is heating up. It's getting serious, and let's try to not let it take our humanity from us, okay? Let's try to do this in a reasonable way so that it hopefully doesn't come to actual wars over resources, so that it doesn't come to having to do embargoes against countries. Let's just come together and fucking fix this so that hopefully it just won't come to that, because I don't want to see it get nasty, and it's already going to get pretty fucking nasty, but it's just a question of how nasty are we going to let it get?